we're just tapping into those abilities.
Is there an Earth 2.0 out there?
When you have new eyes, you discover new things. With Webb, we're discovering a new universe.
That's just amazing.
New Eye on the Universe on Nova. Wednesday at 8 on WTTW.
Next time,
Welcome to Langley Hall.
when Bunty speaks at a school for troubled young women,
I could tell you a few stories, that is for sure. But I won't.
the headmistress
I hate you! I wish you were dead!
is murdered,
We need to find Brenda Palmer.
They want me to confess to something I didn't even do.
and Father Brown investigates.
There's more going on here than meets the eye.
Father Brown.
Thursday at 8 on WTTW.
Next time on Shakespeare and Hathaway.
She's got a mystery that's haunting her.
A woman wants the team to investigate her mother's death.
She crashed into a ditch. They didn't find the car till a week later.
She suspects her father's involvement.
She's wrong.
But when he's killed, they're given a puzzle.
Begin with the princes.
Begin with the princess.
And Lou will have to step up.
Bingo.
You terrify me sometimes.
Shakespeare and Hathaway.
Thursday at 9 on WTTW. The Martin and Mary L. Boyer Foundation generously supports programming on WTTW in loving memory of Alan I. Boyer.
Next time, after a woman calls to report a murder, she's found close to death.
They got her heart going, but she's still unconscious.
The only people who could have done it have alibis.
We were all in here watching a film.
Was she finding out about her own murder?
Death in Paradise.
Saturday at 7 on WTTW.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz is on assignment. Here's what we're looking at.
The betrayal by the city that they served.
A political battle with CPD officers caught in the middle. Election Day is just a week away. What you should know about casting your ballot. Plus, somehow business leaders are spending in this year's election to expand their reach inside City Hall.
Months before that bill lands in your mailbox, local governments, cities, counties, and school districts decide how much money they need.
Cook County property tax bills are on the way. WTTW News explains how your bill is calculated.
I'm Angelito, and coming up tonight, we're taking a trip back in time with help from the Green Book.
And now to some of today's top stories. City workers say they're frustrated with the slow pace of contract negotiations and plan to escalate in the coming days. The union, representing more than 3,000 city employees who work in libraries, police precincts, and health clinics, among other positions, says they've been negotiating for 10 months. AFSCME Council 31 says another temporary extension comes to an end this weekend, opening the door to a work stoppage if necessary. But Mayor Lightfoot says she thinks a deal can be made before a strike occurs.
That is fair for the union and the members, but also fair to our taxpayers. So that sometimes takes some time. We've resolved, I think, the larger issues with COOP. We've resolved, I think, almost every outstanding issue with individual trade unions. AFSCME is one of the last ones that's outstanding.
Both sides are back at the bargaining table on Thursday. Little Village community members are calling for a criminal investigation into the botched Hillco smokestack implosion in 2020.
It clearly shows that our alderman has failed again. And I say again because they have failed us in many occasions on protecting our air and our environment.
The group cites the report from former Chicago Inspector General Joe Ferguson that shows the city could have done more to prevent the impact on the community around the old Crawford power plant at 35th and Pulaski. WTTW News first reported the findings of that investigation last week, though the report has still not been made public. Members of the Little Village Community Council blame 22nd Ward Alderman Michael Rodriguez for the implosion gone wrong and ask both state and federal prosecutors to intervene. Rodriguez did respond to this protest outside his ward office today in a statement saying he has called for an investigation into the city's and Hillco's role in the demolition and for reform in handling the release of Inspector General reports. Former Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger has a new book deal. In a statement, the Iraq War veteran says he wants to tell the inside story of how he feels the Republican Party has been hijacked by extremists who represent a danger to democracy. Kinzinger is one of just 2 Republicans in Congress who broke with the party to join a House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The book is called, quote, Renegade, My Life in Faith, the Military and Defending America from Trump's Attack on Democracy, and is slated for release this fall. Up next, emotional testimony by officers who say the city's wrongly denying them disability benefits. Amanda Venicky with that story right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Fresh controversy for Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. This time, a former rival accuses the mayor of abandoning police afflicted by the coronavirus. Amanda Venicky joins us now to explain. Amanda, what is the situation here?
Brandis, Illinois Controller Susana Mendoza says she blames Mayor Lightfoot for betraying Chicago police officers in their time of need. It is an accusation that Lightfoot vehemently denies. The dispute's over what sort of disability benefits CPD officers deserve if they got COVID before the vaccine was available. Now, briefly rewind to early in the pandemic in 2020, when COVID was rampant, as were questions about it. While many worked via Zoom per stay-at-home orders, police were still on the streets. Controller Mendoza says her brother, CPD Sergeant Joaquin Mendoza, worked 17 days straight. One day, he had a cough. 2 days later, she says he was rushed to the hospital with COVID. She says he spent 42 days fighting for his life.
COVID viciously attacked both his renal and vascular system. He lost both his kidneys, requiring 3 days of dialysis a week for the rest of his shortened life expectancy. He suffered 5 strokes, leaving him permanently disabled and unable to perform the one thing he loved most, his job.
Which is why Mendoza says she was aghast when the Chicago Police Pension Board ruled her brother did not qualify for line of duty disability benefits. Because he couldn't prove precisely when, how, from whom he contracted COVID, the board decided Sergeant Mendoza qualifies instead for a lesser benefit that comes without health care coverage. A former CPD captain who worked with Mendoza says the board set an impossible standard.
Who in the hell can say how you caught your COVID? Can you point anyone in this room who had it? Can you point to the individual that gave it to you? I doubt it.
The ruling came despite a state law that provides it's assumed police officers who contracted COVID pre-vaccine are presumed to have gotten it on the job, meaning if they die, their family would receive line of duty death benefits.
If you survive COVID and become disabled from it, you're out of luck. That makes absolutely no sense.
Well, Sergeant Mendoza was the first case attorneys say up to 20 other CPD officers have similar situations that have or will be settled by the pension board, including Officer Diana Cordova-Nestad, who says she worked hard to get promoted at the CPD, only to be found not fit for duty after contracting COVID and then denied line of duty benefits.
It felt like it was just ripped right out of my chest. That's all I knew was my work. That's all I worked for.
Including anything about politics, but Mendoza, she doesn't. She says Mayor Lightfoot's at fault for directing her hand-picked appointees to the pension board to make those rulings. She says it's a sign of the administration's contempt for Lightfoot with long COVID.
Any suggestion that I or anyone in my administration is in to the cause and suffering of first responders when it comes to COVID issues is just utter nonsense.
The mayor denies that she gave pension appointees any instruction and says it would be inappropriate and unethical for her to do so. She says the board should be independent and operate without fear or favor.
No one gets special treatment because of who they are or to whom they're related. And that doesn't change whether we're in a week before an election or at any other time of the year.
Well, Amanda, the election is next week. What about the timing here?
Yeah, you can't ignore that. And also recall that Mendoza did run for mayor and, of course, lost. Lightfoot won 4 years ago. Mendoza, though, asked about it. She says that this is not political. She didn't get into who she endorsed in the race. She says that the timing is solely dependent on the pension board's actions and then also on a ruling from a local court judge. And by the way, that judge did agree with the pension board, but Mendoza's are appealing.
So, Amanda, what's next?
Well, the election, of course, for starters. Beyond that, though, of course, we could see court action as the appeal is acted on, but also bring us a new proposal in Springfield. And this would make it so that first responders who got COVID before the vaccine would, and then now can't work, would be presumed to qualify for line of duty disability benefits. And by the way, as drafted, that would be retroactive. By the way, I did reach out to the city's pension board, but did not get any response to repeated calls or an email.
Okay, Amanda Vinicky, thanks so much. Up next, a rundown of things to know before heading to the polls on Election Day. Stay with us. We're 1 week away from Election Day, and election officials say early voting turnout this time around is high, far outpacing previous citywide elections. For those still planning on casting their ballot, here's a rundown on what you should keep in mind. Joining us now is Max Bever, Director of Public Information at the Chicago Board of Elections. Max, welcome back. What is the status of early voting right now? How many people have you seen cast their ballots?
So we've got some really encouraging numbers coming back so far. So as of last night, Monday the 20th, we've had over 48,000 early voting ballots come back so far. Over 61,000 vote-by-mail ballots for over 117,000 ballots cast so far within this city. So compare that to 2019, 2015, our last two municipal elections. That's more than double, almost getting to triple the amount of ballots that have been cast so far. That means that people have made up their mind, they're voting already, and they're doing it quicker than they have in previous years. But the steady amount of voting that we've seen over the last 3 weeks really suggests that we're going to have a high turnout for Election Day.
And how can you tell that folks aren't just changing their habit, casting their vote early or by mail rather than on Election Day itself?
Right now, it's the speed of so many that are coming back. This is the last week of early voting. This is generally when we see the biggest amount of people coming out to vote. They use all of the 50 ward sites. Those numbers have been encouraging. We had just over 6,000 last night. This is going to continue to pick up and pick up. Where we're thinking that this means that it's heading towards Election Day rather than just capturing the vote-by-mail voters and the early voters that generally come is that by Monday, we might have over 200,000. The way that the last November election, as well as June, played out is that we've had about 25% of voters vote by mail, 25% of voters early vote, and 50% of voters vote on Election Day. We don't think that that will change much for February. We know that more people will probably stay home and more people are voting by mail than ever because it is February. But we do expect that a lot of people are still waiting for Election Day because municipal elections, people make up their mind much later in the process. It's a nonpartisan election. It's a quick campaign season. There's still a lot that can happen in a week for a candidate saying something or coming down on a particular issue. But we do know that a lot of people have already made up their minds, and even more people are making up their minds right now.
And a lot of candidates to choose between, particularly in the mayoral race. What do you think is driving this higher turnout right now?
That could be one of the reasons, too. We've had the most amount of candidates running in a municipal election ever. So we have nearly 300. So we can say for sure that voters are pretty aware that there's an election coming up next Tuesday. But given that there's that many campaigns talking to people, we have this many mayoral candidates, and we have an entirely new office on the ballot for the first time with the police district councils, that this is driving a lot of interest in the race and a lot of voters to the polls.
Let's talk about that particular race. Of course, on the ballot, we've got mayor, city clerk, treasurer, alderperson, city council, and a new one, as you said, police district council. Tell us how the races for those seats will work.
Sure. So for the first time in over a century, a new municipal office was added to the ballot. Voters have been used to voting for mayor, for treasurer, for clerk, and their local alderperson. For the first time, they're going to see a new office right beyond that, and they're going to be asked to vote for up to three candidates for a police district council. This is a new office that was created by the Chicago City Council recently. This will ultimately support the Community Commission on Public Safety and Accountability. But this will be voters' only chance to vote for this office. These offices are not going to the next round or to a runoff election. Voters are going to be asked to choose three, and those top three vote getters are going to win office on February 28th.
Tell us how same-day voter registration works. What do people need?
So in Illinois and in Chicago, we're lucky to have the safety net of same-day registration. There is no hard deadline for voter registration anymore. So if you are eligible to vote, you can vote in Chicago and vote in Illinois. So you just need two forms of ID, one with your current address on them. So even if you've never been registered to vote before, or if you've recently changed your name or recently moved, that's a lot of Chicago voters, you've recently moved before the last election and haven't updated your voter registration, you can do so at any early voting site. So if you go into that site, bring those forms of ID with you, you'll get you registered, and then you can vote. And you can also do it on election day at any precinct polling place. So your assigned precinct polling place on election day, you can get registered to vote. And we're also going to have 51 vote centers open on Election Day. That's all 50 ward sites, as well as our super site downtown at Clark and Lake. We appreciate the Illinois legislature has allowed this again. We'd certainly like to see them make it permanent, but we're going to have these sites open on Election Day during regular hours, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. The convenience for voters there is ultimately that they can vote at any location that they want. If you live in the 1st Ward and you want to vote in the 50th Ward, you can do so.
All right, so we've got 30 seconds left. I have to ask, what's the likelihood there'll still be some undetermined races at the end of election night?
Unfortunately, that's quite likely. And given the way that vote by mail has been dominating the ballot so far, and that we have over 205,000 vote by mail applications out there, vote by mail ballots don't get counted until election night at 7 o'clock. So they'll start to be counted on election nights. A lot of these races, especially all the people races, are going to be close. They come down to a handful of votes. So we do have some patience as all the votes are counted on election night and passed.
Going to be a long night, especially for you, Max Bever. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brandis.
Appreciate it. And don't forget to visit our WTTW News voter guide for a countdown to Election Day, candidate profiles and responses to questionnaires, and of course, our ongoing political coverage. It's all at WTTW.com/voterguide. Up next, how business leaders are challenging a progressive push in City Hall. But first, a look at the weather. As we mentioned earlier, today marks 1 week until Election Day, and the battle for control of City Council is shaping up. And some of the city's wealthiest business leaders are spending big bucks to prevent progressive political organizations from shifting the balance of power at City Hall. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now to explain. Heather, you took a look at spending by this newly formed political fund that calls itself the Get Stuff Done PAC, which is a very straight-to-the-point name. What did you find?
Well, this group was created by a former aide to former Mayor Rahm Emanuel and has so far raised $1.7 million, including $1 million directly from Michael Sachs, one of the wealthiest people in Chicago and a close advisor to Emanuel when he was mayor. Now, they have spent more than $600,000 to support 14 candidates and oppose 2 other candidates. Those candidates are Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez in the 25th Ward and Nick Ward, who's running in Edgewater in the 48th Ward. They say they are designed to support pragmatic candidates and keep people from outside the mainstream from serving on the city council.
Also, a political fund operated by the Illinois Realtors has also spent a significant amount of money in city council races. How much have they spent? Who are they backing?
So they have spent $325,000, and they are supporting 19 candidates. And many of the same candidates are also supported by the Get Stuff Done PAC. So they aren't working together, but they are amplifying each other's efforts. And they have put a significant amount of firepower behind those chosen candidates.
candidates. Are progressive groups able to keep up with this kind of spending?
So this cycle, business leaders are really neutral in the race for mayor. Some have lined up behind Paul Vallis, but people like Michael Sachs are sitting this one out. So that has let them train all of their spending power on city council races. And with the Chicago Teachers Union focused on the mayor's race and supporting Brandon Johnson, that has left these progressive candidates for city council at a little bit of a disadvantage.
Now, not only is this a battle for control of city council, also a battle for who controls Chicago's progressive movement. How's that playing out?
Well, what's interesting is that Jesus Chuy Garcia, who's also running for mayor, has backed a slate of aldermanic candidates who are not socialists, who do not belong to the Democratic Socialists of America. And he says that these candidates have the best shot at being his helpers on the city councils, assuming he wins. But that has left the future of the progressive movement really not only fighting each other, but also the business community.
All right, a week to go, Heather Sharon. Way too early to panic. Thank you so much. Of course, we'll hear from you again later in the show to explain how property taxes are calculated.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story about political funds in the mayor's race on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. Up next, a visit to the Illinois Holocaust Museum to learn about a resource that aided black drivers during the Jim Crow era. A traveling exhibit of the Smithsonian Institution has made its way to a northern suburb of Chicago to showcase what it was like driving while black during the Jim Crow era. Arts correspondent Angel Ito recalls this critical resource that aided black drivers during that time.
But you need to be careful on the road. Old Jim Crow won't let people like us stop just anywhere.
Driving while black, especially during the Jim Crow era, was not safe for black Americans.
You may have had a map, but the map isn't going to detail for you if the town you're coming into is a sundown town, if you are going to be served at the restaurant, if you're going to have to enter through the back door. So by creating the Green Book, he was making black lives better and more enjoyable and safer.
Now, in 1936, the Negro Motorist Green Book was created by Harlem postman Victor Hugo Green, and it was actually modeled after another book that had been created for Jewish travelers during that time.
For us, we are a Holocaust museum, but because of the Holocaust, it's also part of our mission that we look at other social justice issues, human rights violations, human rights atrocities, and certainly the Jim Crow era and segregation in the United States. And then this amazingly creative, entrepreneurial, and almost simple response to it is something we wanted to highlight. We educate people through the exhibitions that we have on the Holocaust and on other issues so that we can create a more active and engaged citizenry that will actually take action in their community and fight for a better society.
For nearly 30 years, the Green Book led black drivers down roads by outlining restaurants, hotels, safe houses, and other safe spaces they could frequent without fearing for their lives. Chicago and Marlene Flagg came to visit the exhibit to better understand the experiences of her Southern family, like her aunt.
When she was driving through a certain town of Mississippi, her children were in the back seat. She was able to go through the town without anyone stopping her because she looked like she was white. But her children were black and looked black. So what she did, she put them in the back seat of the car and told them to lay down, and she took a blanket, covered them with a blanket, and told them not to move and not to talk while she drove through the town.
The Great Migration and Route 66 both play a part in the Green Book, marking Chicago's presence. Bronzeville specifically made up 80% of the city's listings.
The amount of black Americans that came up to Chicago and then would need to travel back south to visit family. Chicago is also the starting point of Route 66, which is the way in which you would really get west. So we have not only this incredible neon sign from the Sutherland, which was a hotel and club, but today is an apartment building. We also have a projection that includes some of the businesses that were listed in the Green Book. There were about 200 businesses that were listed over the years in the Green Book that were in Chicago. About 30 of the buildings still exist, and about 2 of the businesses still exist.
But the need for the Green Book changed when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. Expanding accessibility meant Black-owned businesses had to compete with bigger franchises, which had more resources and fewer obstacles. At least half of the featured businesses in the Green Book were closed less than a decade later as a result.
We can't forget our history. So it's important not just for this month, but for every day. Share your experiences with your children. Ask your grandparents, let the grandparents, the great-grandparents while they're alive, share their experiences, and also record it, oral history too, so it won't be forgotten.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And you can see the Green Book exhibit at the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie through April 23rd. Cook County property tax bills are on the way. The Treasurer's office says nearly 1.8 million tax bills will arrive in mailboxes by early March and are now available online. That first installment is usually due on March 1st, but this year that's been extended to April 3rd. But did you ever wonder just how your property tax bill gets calculated? Our Heather Sharon takes you on a journey through that game, part of our series, WTTW News Explains.
Property taxes can be a doozy, or rather, how they are calculated can be. Months before that bill lands in your mailbox, local governments, cities, counties, and school districts decide how much money they need. Then the folks in charge break out the calculators to figure out how to spread that amount across all of the properties in the area. That's your tax rate. But it isn't an even split. Your final bill or share is based on the value of your home. After all, the owner of a $100,000 house shouldn't be expected to pay the same as someone with a multi-million-dollar mansion, right? So the number crunchers hit the books, calculating the fair market value of each property using a whole bunch of data, like sale price, lot size, neighborhood, home age, and more, all following a series of steps designed to protect taxpayers from wild swings in their bills. As a property owner, you can appeal your fair market value before it's set. Next up, assessment. In Cook County, residential properties are assessed at 10% of fair market value. If your home is valued at $300,000, the assessed value of your property is $30,000. To help make sure everyone pays their fair share, officials then apply a countywide equalizer to the value of each property. And property owners can get breaks or exemptions for a number of reasons, ranging from old age or military service to just living in their own home. Now it's time to finish up the math. Remember the tax rate from the beginning? Multiply it against that final value and voila, you have your annual property tax bill. And of course, that money goes towards critical community services like schools, healthcare, parks, and libraries. Home sweet home.
It all makes sense now. Again, Cook County property tax bills are now available on the Treasurer's website. They should arrive in your mailbox by early March. And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.
Wednesday night on PBS, starting with the finale of Dogs in the Wild.
Right now, people are going to extraordinary lengths to understand these amazing species.
Followed by a new episode of Nova.
The James Webb Space Telescope is on a mission to unlock the secrets of the cosmos.
The finale of Dogs in the Wild, followed by a new episode of Nova.
From Carnegie Hall, two sensational divas got together to sing spirituals. Kathleen Battle and Jesse Norman.
When I think of a spiritual, I think of hope.
Everyone could feel what a moment it was.
Enjoy how Kathleen Battle and Jesse Norman made history through the magic of spirituals on Great Performances.